As we come to the book, The Song of Songs, we're in sort of uncharted territory. For all of the Bible's pronouncements and moral regulations concerning human sexuality, this one seems to run in the opposite direction. The Song of Songs is a book of erotic poetry that's included in the Hebrew Scriptures. It might not be as detailed as some of the other such literature from the ancient world. This isn't the Kama Sutra, but it does describe a man and a woman in passionate love with each other who are talking about what they desire about each other physically. There's a lot of metaphors in the book, but it's pretty clear what they're talking about. So the question becomes for biblical scholars, why would a conservative religious ancient culture like the Jewish culture have written this, admired it, and included it in the scriptures? Some conservative scholars have tried to say, well, this is just a parallel to Christ's love for the church. It absolutely is not. That's not what the author was thinking, obviously, because it was written 1,000 years before Jesus. And any attempt to make it a metaphor for Christ's love for the church simply stretches the nature of the genre of literature that this is. This is love poetry between a man and a woman. Why is it in there? What was the purpose of including it? Not just of writing it, which we could say was written for a number of different reasons, but why did they include it in the canon of Scripture? It actually reflects part of the nature of humanity. And one of the most basic and primal instincts of humanity, our drive for sexuality, for one another, and the passion of expression of emotion that comes out of that. Just like the Psalms capture a range of emotions, some of which we might not expect to be in the Bible, Song of Songs captures another aspect of the real nature of human beings, something that all of us know and in one way or another relate to. It just describes it in living detail, essentially blessing the nature of our humanity. In order to talk about love in the Song of Songs, I first want to go on a little bit of a tangent and talk about C.S. Lewis and his book, The Four Loves. He uses some ancient Greek concepts, some Greek words that described love, so as to give us categories with which to think about it. We use the word love very loosely in modern American English. I love my wife, I love chocolate, I love the dog, I love taking a nap, and those are not all the same emotion that's being expressed by the word love. They all kind of share a strong attraction, but they're very distinct from one another. Lewis tries to give us categories using the Greek words for love, which were perhaps a little bit more sophisticated than modern English. So in the book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis names four types of love taken from Greek verbs or Greek nouns. Storge is one, a basic a human kind of affection, a very earthly family kind of affection. Philia, or phileo is the verb, is a kind of a brotherly love. Eros is the kind of love we're talking about in Song of Songs. You hear the word erotic in that word, that noun. And then agape is a self-sacrificing sort of a pinnacle of love. And Lewis goes into each of those four in turn, as I will do now. Storge is affection. It's love that grows out of familiarity and shared life like you would have in a household between family members. Think about how parents love their kids, or siblings on a good day love one another, or even how old friends relate to one another. You may not have chosen it originally. It may have just been where you were put, or it simply grew out because you belong to one another, but it is a real kind of love nonetheless. Philia, or phileo is the verb, is friendship. It's the love of people who discover that they share something important with each other and they want to be friends because they are sort of facing in the same direction. The name Philadelphia comes from a combination of two Greek words, philia and adelphos, which is brother, so the love of brothers. And Philadelphia is often called the city of brotherly love because of that naming. In this kind of love, friends share maybe a mutual intellectual interest, or they share a cause. Sometimes they share a common faith, or they find that their worldviews and their sense of humor makes them align with one another. Lewis thought that friendship was remarkably free because friends don't need each other in the way family needs each other. or in the way romantic partners come to depend on each other. The third kind of love is eros, and this is romantic love. It's the experience of being drawn towards one particular person with a passionate kind of consuming desire. You don't simply admire them, you actually want them. You want closeness and intimacy and union with them. This is the love that we encounter in Song of Songs, and that we sing about in our love songs and love poetry, and that we celebrate at weddings. And then finally, agape is really kind of a charitable love, a self-sacrificing, philanthropic love that wants the best for someone else regardless of what we get out of it. This is the love that seeks another person's good instead of our own. We don't begin with the question, what do I get out of this relationship? Instead, we ask, what is good for this other person? For Lewis, this is the form of love most closely associated with God. Now, Lewis's really interesting point is that none of these loves is sufficient all by itself. Affection can be possessive. Friendship can be exclusive. Eros can be obsessive. Even agape, good human love, can become destructive when we ask it to give us what only God can give. That gives us a helpful way to lead into the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs celebrates Eros, but with remarkable freedom and joy. It tells us that human desire is beautiful too, not dirty or forbidden. Lewis reminds us that Eros is only one way that human beings love each other. And so C.S. Lewis and the Book of Songs together raise a fascinating question. How can we learn to receive human love as a gift without turning it into a substitute for God? Okay, when we come to the Song of Songs, we encounter one of the most unusual books in the Bible. There's not even really a narrative to it. There aren't any arguments. It's not trying to lay a moral foundation for anything. God's actually barely mentioned in the book. Instead, we hear these two lovers speaking to each other, and they're admiring each other's bodies. They long for one another. They celebrate the physical world and creation. That creates a kind of an interpretive problem for you and I. What is this book doing in the Bible? Calling it an allegory doesn't quite honor the genre of the literature, although that has been a popular interpretation and immensely influential throughout Christian history. The early church father Origen, and later Bernard of Clairvaux and many others, would write about songs as a profound vocabulary for describing the soul's desire for God. And that might be theologically the case. But we really shouldn't start with that. That just comes from avoidance of the kind of genre that we're reading here. Before asking what they represent, let's ask what it says. The song is at its most immediate level a collection of love poems. Its language is sensual and concrete. They talk about their eyes and their hair and their lips and their necks and their breasts and their fragrance. They talk about gardens and wine and fruit. The natural world provides much of the poem's vocabulary. Mountains, vineyards, animals, spices, gardens. All that describes the beauty and desirability of the beloved, the other person. The human body is not an embarrassment in this book, and physical attraction is not something that has to be explained away. The lovers look at one another and delight in what they see. And it's important that one of the voices is a woman's voice. In much of ancient literature, women appear primarily as objects within stories told by men. They are the objects of affection. But the song gives the woman an unusually powerful voice, and she speaks of her own desire, and she seeks after her beloved, and she praises his body. She says what she wants. That matters because the song presents desire as something that belongs to the woman as much as to the man. The woman is not merely a recipient, she is a subject. The poem also refuses to separate physical attraction from emotional attraction. They don't just want each other's bodies, they want each other as persons, and they want to share each other's lives and memories and anticipation and delight. When the beloved is absent, desire becomes longing. And when they appear, it becomes joy. This helps explain the literary pattern of the book. The beloved is repeatedly sought and then found, and then sought and then found. They experience both presence and absence. And that creates sort of the dynamic movement of the book. Desire reaches towards someone who cannot simply be possessed. And that distinction is important when you look at the imagery of the garden in the book. The garden is probably its central image. It talks about fertility and beauty and intimacy. The garden is a place to be entered and enjoyed, but it's also enclosed and protected. Physical intimacy maintains its sense of mystery. It's not loose here. The beloved remains a person whose beauty can be encountered but not mastered. Scholars have often compared the Song of Songs with other ancient Near Eastern love poetry, particularly Egyptian love songs. Those comparisons are useful because they remind us that this is a recognizable literary world that we're living in, and ancient Israel was not the only culture to write about it, nor were they the originators of it. They probably heard some versions of poems like this when they were in slavery in Egypt. What makes the song distinctive is that it's preserved within Israel's scriptures. So why? One answer is that the scripture is making a surprisingly strong claim about creation. We are embodied creatures. We experience the world through our bodies, through touch and sight and sound, smell. The song refuses to pretend that spiritual life is Gnostic, that it escapes the body. In that sense, the book stands close to the opening chapters of Genesis, where humanity is created male and female, and that is called good. The song takes that kind of goodness and then gives it poetic expression. It allows us to hear what it sounds like when two human beings experience one another as beautiful. So we read the book, first of all, as poetry, and we allow it to speak in its own language and use its own images. We should hear the voices of lovers in this book. We should notice the intensity of the desire and that it takes place with the pleasures of the physical world. Only after we've done that can we start to ask theological questions. What does the celebration of human love have to do with wisdom? Because remember, this is contained in the wisdom literature. It's interesting because the Bible contains several books that explore the meaning of existence, like Proverbs, talks about how to live wisely. Job wrestles with what happens when the algorithm is off. Ecclesiastes does the same, talks about how to encounter meaningless and still maintain purpose. But then Song of Songs is such an oddball. It's this rich picture of human existence, and wisdom involves learning how to live within the world that God made. The song suggests that part of that wisdom involves learning how to receive love and desire and beauty and bodily existence as a gift. And that gives us a good starting point for reading the Song of Songs. Before we turn it into a picture of something else, we have to let it speak about what it's actually celebrating, the mysterious power of human love. And that's a brief introduction to the Song of Songs. We're going to analyze its structure and its cadences, what it does and how it's been used historically. But first and foremost, remember that this poem is meant to be a poem of love between two people. And that in and of itself is affirmed to be a good thing. Just like in the book of Genesis, when God says, He created the male and female, made them for one another, and called it good. God bless your reading and studies. We'll continue on in the Song of Songs.